Well, as I just said, today our focus is going to be on reviewing assignment 3.17, which is the parallelism analysis for your assigned Proverbs passage. And we did this, of course, for the Psalms, your Psalm text, right? You've gone through all these steps. So it's the same steps, same assignment for Proverbs, but there are a few details or things to keep in mind, pay attention to when we do Proverbs. And I also wanted to use a Proverbs passage for the example. Before, when you did your Psalm assignments, I used a passage from Psalms, I think Psalm 128, as an example. But what I'd like to do for these is use Proverbs 1, I think verses 10 to 19. So you'll see an example from Proverbs, since you're going to be doing out of Proverbs. But for many of the steps, it's going to be very, very similar. All right. So today's we're going to look at the parallelism. So we'll be reminding ourselves about a few of the items with parallelism, just in case you forgot or can't remember fully. Or it's always good to review, especially since Stephen said he's going to be preaching from Deuteronomy, from Moses' song, which has parallelism in it, if I remember correctly, but it'll have definitely a poetic features. So parallelism is one of those poetic features to look for, and it's part of the poetic analysis step. And so what we've already done for the book of Proverbs, or you should have done, as assignments that are due, is to those first three steps, which you're going to examine the whole book. And you can go to past sessions where I cover the details for how to do that for Proverbs. And then we get to the step 4, which is where we move from the whole book to our specific passage that's in the book. And we want to analyze that. Oh, by the way, it's kind of interesting. I was studying um, one of the early church fathers. I'm taking classes too. I don't know if you knew that. So I'm actually also suffering with assignments and those things. But I'm taking it for Bible exposition. So we're doing this classes I have this semester are history of interpretation and history of preaching. It's kind of interesting reading some of the early church fathers. I was reading, I think it was Diodore. He lived back in the 5th century. He was one of the fathers, early church fathers, who held up literal interpretation because there was a move toward allegory, in those days. And it's interesting. He was talking about emphasizing the importance of studying the whole book before you study the passage. And even though this guy, this is 1,500 years ago, this guy was writing, but he was still sharing the same principles we've discussed in class, where he said, before you study a passage from the book, he says, you need to understand the purpose of the book. And so he talked about um, just knowing the message of the book, then we're able to better understand how each part of it fits. So we're not teaching anything new here in Taya. It's stuff that's been taught, for over 1,500 years. We're just following in the steps of those who've gone before us. But that's extra. Maybe I'll give you more stuff in class, some of the things I've been learning. But I just thought that was really interesting how he mentioned that. But anyway, knowing the purpose of the book, which is what we get from these first three steps, we then proceed to poetic analysis of the specific passage. And if you remember, poetic analysis is these steps where you read and observe the poem, and then identify the setting and structure, then perform parallelism analysis. That is to look for the parallelism within the poem. If you remember, parallelism describes the relationship between the lines within a verse. All right, there's a connection typically, usually, between the lines within a verse. And we see this most often in the Psalms and in Proverbs. Some of the other poetic passages outside of Psalms and Proverbs, like the prophetic texts, or even Ecclesiastes or Song of Solomon, those are poetic passages. They use the poetic genre, but they don't always contain um, parallelism. But for the most part, Psalms and Proverbs do. And again, there's a particular intentional relationship between the lines within a verse. All right. And we looked at before, I'll just briefly review these and then we'll go through the Proverbs example together. But let's just remember the basic types of parallelism in Hebrew poetry. The first being, and the one we're most familiar with, I think one of the more easier ones to identify, is synonymous parallelism. Again, that's where the second line in the verse repeats the first one. So here's a Proverbs example. Her ways are pleasant ways, all her paths are peace. Notice very similar in structure. Her ways, her paths. Are is the verb, are, in both cases, and then pleasant ways and peace. Now, synonymous means synonym, right? It won't be exactly the same. It's not, he doesn't say her ways are pleasant ways and her ways are pleasant ways. That's redundant. That's not really poetic. But they'll say the same kind of thing using synonyms or similar words. So here, instead of ways, he says paths. Instead of pleasant, he says peace. But those carry a similar idea. So synonymous indicates that. Second line essentially repeats the first line. And you'll see the same kind of grammatical structure. Again, notice her ways, her paths. The verb are is the same. Pleasant ways, peace. Okay, so keep that in mind. Now, there is the word and there, but don't think that that means this is a developmental expansion or addition, because what he says after that, the two lines are almost the same thought, just expressed slightly differently. So this is synonymous. All right. Then the second type of parallelism, also a little bit easier to identify, is contrastive. Oh, here's one more example from Psalm 19. Day to day pours forth speech, night to night reveals knowledge. Again, notice the synonymous nature here. Day to day. Now, night to night is opposite, but it's still, notice the style, night to night, day to day. And then also that's referring to a time reference, and both do that. Then you have pours forth versus reveals. Again, similar idea. Speech, knowledge, similar idea. So this would be synonymous. Okay. And then we have the evil will bow down before the good, the wicked at the gates of the righteous. Now notice here, we have the evil, the wicked, before the good, at the gates of the righteous. Again, similar idea. Now notice the second line, though, does not have will bow down. Anyone remember what's going on here? What did we call that when the second line does not repeat what's in the first, though the idea is there? Does anyone remember what that term is called?
Is that elision, Pastor?
Yeah, ellipsis, or we might say Elysian, elided, or Elysian, sometimes those terms, but ellipsis. That means that the idea of will bow down is in the second line, but the author just chose not to put it there explicitly. Because again, this would be redundant, right? The evil will bow down before the good. The wicked will bow down at the gates of the righteous. That's not as aesthetically pleasing. That's not as beautiful or artistic. And remember, poetry, one of the characteristics is being short, terse. So the verse says this, but the idea is still this, that the wicked will bow down at the gates of the righteous. So this is synonymous, even though we don't see the will bow down in the second line. It's still, the second line is still repeating or reiterating the idea of the first line. All right. Now, any questions on synonymous? All right.
No
That's
question.
okay. Yeah, I think it's pretty straightforward. And I think
Yeah.
contrastive is as well, which is our next one. Remember, the contrastive is the second line, contrasts or opposes or is opposite to the first, right? So we have the house of the wicked will be destroyed, but the tent of the upright will flourish. Notice we have opposites here, contrasts. Yes, house and tent refer to the same thing, but we have the wicked versus the upright. We have destroyed versus flourish. Flourish means to grow, to be productive. And so here it's clearly a contrast. It's not, the second line does not say the same thing as the first. It really is saying the opposite of the first, but it says it in a similar way. Notice again, the house versus the tent, and then of the wicked versus of the upright will be destroyed, will flourish. Right? So grammatically, these are very similar, but it's presenting two opposing or contrasting ideas. And then, yeah, the word but there is a helpful guide as well. But remember, even if but is there, that doesn't always mean contrast. Okay. And you don't have to have the word but there to see the contrasting parallelism. We see that in the next example. Notice the one who guards his mouth preserves his life. The one who opens wide his lips comes to ruin. Again, notice the parallel structure here. The one versus the one. And then notice we see a contrast now. Who guards? Now the contrast, who opens wide? His mouth, his lips. So those are similar. But notice in the first one, the one who guards preserves his life. The one who opens wide comes to ruin. That's the opposite. So this is contrastive. It's contrasting the one who guards his mouth versus the one who opens it wide. The one who guards preserves, the one who opens wide comes to ruin. So this is contrasting. And notice there is no but here at the beginning of the second line, but it's still contrastive. All right. Okay. I think those are the straightforward ones. Now we get into ones that are a little more challenging, and that is the developmental, where the one line develops the other. So they're still connected. There's still a relationship between the two lines in the verse. And this time, the relationship, it's not a synonymous relationship. It's not contrastive. This third type is it develops. Either it can develop by adding to, it can develop by explaining, or it can develop by giving a reason or result. All right. So the first type of developmental parallelism is this expansion, or we could say addition. The second line is adding something to the first. All right. It's not synonymous. It's not contrasting. So, for example, here, the heart knows its own bitterness, and a stranger does not share its joy. These lines are talking about the same thing. They're referring to the heart in some way, but it's not a synonymous or contrastive reference. The second line is adding new information. The first statement, the heart knows its own bitterness, and then it doesn't say, and the soul understands its sorrow, right? If it had said that, let's say it said that, and the soul understands its sorrow. Okay? This would be synonymous, right? Heart, soul, knows, understands its own bitterness, its sorrow. You see that? That would be synonymous. That would be presenting a similar idea in both lines. Or if the second line had been, say, the heart knows its own bitterness, but the mind knows its joy. Now, this is a nonsensical statement, but I'm just trying to show you the difference. This would be a contrast, right? The heart and the mind both know, one knows bitterness, the other knows joy. Okay, those are opposites. But that's not what this verse says. This verse has just a new or additional thought. The heart knows its own bitterness, and a stranger does not share its joy. Now, bitterness and joy are opposites, but the heart and a stranger, um, I mean, I guess there could be a case for contrastive here. I have to think about it. But it seems like, we're just getting more information about the heart. Only the heart knows its bitterness. A stranger does not, doesn't share in its joy, the heart's joy. So I don't know that it's contrasting what the heart knows. I think it's just adding another information about the fact that only the heart understands its bitterness and its joy. Okay? A second form of
Pastor,
development. Yeah, question or comment.
it, I'm just confused of the sentence. Is there any possible ellipsis in this line in the second line, Pastor Tim?
What do
Yeah,
you
for
think
example,
would be
the
ellipsis?
stranger, for example, stranger's heart does not share its joy or like that.
Um, I don't think so because um, there's nothing
Or
else
the heart.
that, yeah. If it had just said, yeah, I don't think there would have been some other clue on this one. Um, if it had said, I don't know, like that of a stranger, that would refer to the stranger's heart, but I don't think so in this case. Because it'd have to be like stranger's heart. So that would be too much of a difference. That's a good question, but yeah, I don't see that it's doing that. All right. Okay. Second form of developmental explanation or illustration. That is one line explains, gives further understanding of, or illustrates the other. So, as the deer pants for the water brooks, so my soul pants for you, O God. So the my soul pants for you, O God, is the statement, and he illustrates it in the first line. What's it like? Like the deer pants for water, my soul pants for you. Okay, so I would have the second line or the first line um, is a developmental. It illustrates or explains the second line. All right, the second line makes a statement. The first line gives a picture of it. So I call this developmental um, explanation, and then I would say the first line explains second. Okay. And then the third type of developmental is the reason or result. Here is the statement: leave the presence of a fool. Why? The reason, or you will not discern his words. Okay, notice it's not parallel. He doesn't say leave the presence of the fool and escape the counsel of the wicked, something like that. That would be parallel. Similar thought to the similar thoughts. Here, he's saying, do this, leave the presence of fool, or he says, or this is going to happen. So that's a reason. All right. Second example. The beginning of strife is like letting out water, so abandon the quarrel before it breaks out. So he's explaining, why do you abandon the quarrel? Because the beginning of strife is like letting out water. All right. So the second line gives the reason, or sorry, the first line gives the reason for the second. So in this upper one, it's developmental result, a reason. Second line gives the reason for the first. And in this second example, Proverbs 17, it's also reason. But in this case, it's the first line gives the reason for the second. Right? Abandon the quarrel. Why? Because the beginning of strife is like letting out water. All right, so that's the connection between the two lines. All right, questions on developmental.
And so far, positive.
Okay.
Dr. Tim, is it
Yeah.
uh I think in the notes is purpose or result. So the purpose is synonymous with reason.
Yeah. Reason or result, reason or purpose. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Tim.
Sorry for the
So
confusion.
when we describe the developmental, it's it's okay to say reason, I mean purpose or result, or we have to distinguish whether it's a result or it's reason.
You should distinguish which one it is. Okay. But if you just put reason or result, I mean, I'd be okay with that because that's different than these other two. So, but try to distinguish between it, which one it might be. And sometimes it's hard to tell, right? But
Yes, it's hard to tell because, for example,
sometimes the result
here,
is the reason.
yes. For example, like give here Usans the instruction of a father and give attention that you may gain understanding. So is it
Yeah.
is it reason or result?
Yeah.
Gaining
Yeah.
understanding is the reason or the result. So something sometimes it's I think more result more purpose or reason.
Usually, yes. But yeah, you're right. Sometimes it's hard to tell. So if you at least put both, then I mean I'll see that you understand it's different than the other options. So I would give you credit for that.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Dave.
All right, good question. Okay, then we have the special case. This is really not a fourth kind of parallelism. It's usually sometimes a synonymous or contrastive parallelism, but it has a special feature of chiasm, where the two lines are synonymous or contrastive, but the second line is also reversed in order, in the word order, compared to the first. We went through the example in class, Psalm 51, and there were many of these chiasms in Psalm 51. One example of be gracious to me, O God, according to your loving kindness. That's the first line. And then the second line starts with, according to the greatness of your compassion, blot out my transgressions. So be gracious to me, O God, blot out my transgressions. Those go together. But then notice, according to your loving kindness is the end of the first line. Here, I'll show you the actual verse. All right. Be gracious to me, O God, according to your loving kindness. And then notice the second line. He reverses the word order. According to the abundance of your compassion, blot out my transgressions. All right. And so I write it out like this in this form, just so you can see the chiasm. So the first and last lines go together, and then the middle two lines go together. But the middle two, notice the second line, excuse me, begins with according to the greatness of your compassion, which matches how the first line ends. And so this is an intentionally done by the author to point to what's in the middle, that part that's reversed. It's a form of emphasis. It's a way to write something to indicate to the reader you're emphasizing that. Because the reader, like the Hebrew reader, and even in English we can see it, you notice, oh, wait a minute. The second line's not exactly the same. It's flipped. It's synonymous. The idea is synonymous, but the order's been changed. And again, that draws attention. So in this case, in verse 1, David, the author, is drawing attention to according to your loving kindness, according to the greatness of your compassion. So that's, if you were teaching or preaching this passage, you would want to give particular attention to this part of the verse, that he's giving a little bit more emphasis on God's loving kindness and his compassion. He's really, saying, God, because of, according to your love, according to your compassion, show me grace, blot out my transgressions. So we would give the emphasis to those two according to lines. All right. So look for that. Pay attention to the word order of each line as well. All right. And then lastly, if we can't figure out, and happens sometimes, the parallelism may not even be there, or it's just not clear, you can just put but. Right? We don't know. Who knows? Not sure. So and that does occur. There are times where you just but I have no idea what to do here. Okay. So again, synonymous, contrastive, developmental, and then there's three kinds of developmental. A chiasm, which again will really be part of a synonymous or contrastive, and then but. All right, so that's a review. We're going to jump to the Proverbs example. I'm going to give you guys a chance to practice, but before we do that, are there any questions at this point? We've just been reviewing, but I know sometimes can forget. Okay. If not, then let me just remind you the procedure, and here I'll pull up the actual assignment itself. Okay, this is assignment here, assignment, assignment 317. Parallelism for your assigned Proverbs passage. And I chose Proverbs 1, 8 to 19 for my example. These are the steps, all right, for parallelism. First, identify how many lines are contained within each verse. Is it 2 lines? 3 lines? Sometimes there's more. If it's 2 lines, then we just compare those 2 lines. If it's 3 lines, then we'll need to compare lines 1 and 2 and lines 2 and 3. And sometimes it'll be combination, lines 1 and 2 with line 3. So it's a little more complicated. All right, but first identify how many lines. And if you remember, I mentioned to you, and you won't have this issue in Proverbs, but sometimes you'll have one translation that has 2 lines and another one may have 3 or some other different number. And I went through the reason for that. It has to do with the Hebrew accent marks, and we talked about that in class a little bit. You don't have to go into the Hebrew and figure it out. What I told you to do is you need to compare, look at your passage in another English translation. Actually 2. Look at it in the ESV, the New American Standard, and New King James. And then if there's a difference in the number of lines, just pick usually there'll be two of those versions that match. So just pick that one. We won't have that issue with Proverbs. I think it's almost always 2 lines. So we don't have to worry about it here. But when we're doing the Psalms or sometimes other texts, there will usually often be at least a verse or two that has more than 2 lines. It's more than a couplet. All right. But we won't worry about that for Proverbs in this case. Okay. So with that, here's the 2 steps. Identify how many lines, then identify the type of parallelism used between each line. And again, here's the kinds. Let's just see, I'm going to do this. Okay, let's jump into Proverbs 1, 8 to 19. And I'll do the first one just for an example, and then we'll go through it together. Now, I'm going to combine the steps here. I just tell you to identify how many lines, and then after you do that, then do the second step will be go back and identify the parallelism. Let's just do it both for each verse, just to save a little time. But in your assignment, so for example, this is what I mean. In the assignment, notice I have the first step, identify the number of lines, and so I do that. And then the second step, I have identify the parallelism, then we do that. So for the assignment, that's what you'll do for your text. Identify how many lines, and then identify the type of parallelism. But for our practice today together, I'm going to have us combine those 2 steps, okay? So with that, I'll do the first one, and then have you guys, we'll take turns doing the other ones, all right? Okay. So the first one, hear my son, your father's instruction. Do not forsake your mother's teaching. All right. So we have hear, do not forsake. We have your fathers and your mothers. We have instruction and teaching. So there's 2 lines here, by the way. And I believe it's synonymous parallelism here. Synonymous. Because again, notice hear and then do not forsake. And again, in the Hebrew idea, the context, when it's that word hear often means obey, right? And the Shema, hear, O Israel, Lord your God. So the idea is listen with the intent to respond in obedience. So hear and do not forsake really are synonymous ideas. And of course, we have your father and your mother. Now, father and mother are not the exact same person, but they're both right, each parent. And then instruction and teaching is synonymous. So this is synonymous parallelism. The second line essentially repeats or reiterates the first. Okay? All right. I chose the easy one. I'm going to have you guys follow me up. Godwin, I'm going to have you do verse 9. First, tell us how many lines there are, and then what is the type of parallelism that you see here? Go ahead and read the verse first, and then you can.
Indeed, they are a graceful wreath to your head and ornaments about your neck. Mm,
Okay, so how many lines?
two, uh, 2 lines, Pastor Tim.
2 lines. And then normally we would, let's see, let me do this.
What are others? Wait, check for another translation.
Yeah, so we have New King James is 2 lines, and
Got
English
the
Standard is 2 lines.
ESV. Mm,
Okay,
yes.
so yes, 2 lines.
And after that,
And then which form of parallelism do you see here?
I think, wait, indeed your graceful wreath to your head, ornaments about your neck. Somehow just like a synonymous, or yeah, wait. So about your neck and wreath to your head.
Yeah, so let's just look for it. Okay, so that's a
Mm,
similarity. We have
mm About your neck, it's still the same
your
part of the
head.
body.
We have,
And graceful wreath is just like an ornaments.
yeah,
It's the same.
so those are. Now then we have the they are.
They are,
Now we don't have a similar one here, but
yeah, ellipses.
yeah. So
So the
so yeah, you were right. 2 lines.
2 lines, synonymous.
The second line
The second line
repeats
repeats
first.
the first line.
Yep. Good. And like we said, there's some ellipses here. The they
Yes,
are.
ellipsis.
They are is implied in that second line.
Mm.
All right, good. Great.
Thank you, Pastor.
Okay, Jay, you want to try the third one here? Sorry. Let me do this. I'm going to pull this up. You can read it off of the, we're on verse 10.
Verse 10. My son, if sinners entice you, do not be dwelling.
Okay. So, or this one. Yeah, do not be willing. That's it. So we first want to ask how many lines?
2 lines.
2 lines. And let's just make sure. Let's look at the ESV, 2 lines, and the New King James, 2 lines. So, okay. And then now, what kind of parallelism do you see here?
I think it's reason, Pastor.
Sorry?
Reason.
Result or reason? Is that what you said? Developmental? Is that what you're thinking?
Aye.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, so you're saying developmental reason or result? Is that what I heard you say?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, good. Let's look at this. So he says, my son, if sinners entice you, do not be willing. So notice it doesn't look like synonymous or contrastive. The second line is saying something different than the first. And so, yeah, the question is, it's developmental of some kind. Is it expansion? Is it explanation or illustration? Or is it reason result? Right? And so Jay went with the reason result. Now, which line would be the reason or result of which line? The second line is the reason for the first, or the first the reason for the second? What were you thinking?
I think it's the reason.
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
I think I'm wrong, Pastor.
Oh, what do you think now? It's almost like the second line is sort of completing the first one, right? Because without the second line, if sinners entice you, it's kind of left open, right? It needs something to complete it. Whereas like in synonymous, each line is saying basically the same thing. So like for example in verse 9, we could take out the second line and the idea is still there, right? They are, right? Your father's instruction are a graceful wreath to your head. The second line's only saying essentially the same thing. But in verse 10, you take out the second line, then it's incomplete. So there is a connection. It is developmental. It seems like perhaps it's really expanding. I think that might be the best one to choose. It's adding to the first line. And it's really completing it in this case. So I would say it's developmental expansion, or some call it addition. Okay? That makes sense?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Stephen, I'm going to give you the third line here. Verse 11.
Verse 11, if they say, come with us, let us lie in wait for blood, let us ambush the innocent without cause. So it's 3 lines.
Yeah, and
And
then
then
what we want to do is make sure. So let's look at the other two translations. So New King James has 3 lines.
3 lines.
ESV, ESV has 2. But by our rule, we take the one that's 2 out of the 3, and that is the New American Standard also has 3 lines. So we go with the 3 lines.
Okay.
All right. So we'll stick
So
with the New American Standard. What kind? So now we have a few different relationships to consider. We have lines 1 and 2, 2 and 3, or 1, 2 and 3. So what do you think?
so 1 and 2 lines, they are line 2 is a development from line 1, expansion.
Yeah, same
Because
as like the previous verse, right?
so they're 2 different thoughts, but continuous thoughts. So it adds to the previous one. And then line 3 is somehow similar with line 2. Let us lie in wait, let us ambush, so the innocent without cause. So it's somehow synonymous. Line
Yeah,
3 and 2,
I think so. Just
same
notice,
subject and then same thought.
yeah, let us, okay, let us in both lines lie in wait. That's similar to ambush for blood. And then, whoops. And then, yeah, ambush the innocent. Sort of without cause. So it's close. It's not clean. It's not an exact synonymous, but it's a similar idea, right? He doesn't say the innocent in verse 1. So I don't know if it's an ellipsis there or not, but he's presenting a similar idea, two statements that are similar to one another. So I would agree with you that 2 and 3 sort of are more of a synonymous connection, and then 2 and 3 expand on line 1. So I might even do it this way: lines 2 and 3 add to line 1. That's how I would put it. Okay. Sounds a little more complicated. Anyone have questions on that one? I think this is the right way to understand the parallelism here. So he's giving two statements, 2 lines to add to the first. And those 2 lines are synonymous with each other. All right, very good. Jason, if you're there, can you do verse 12 for us?
Yes, Pastor Tim, good morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
Verse 12.
Yeah.
Let us swallow them alive like Sheol, even whole as those who go down to the pit.
So first, how many lines?
2 lines.
There's 2 lines here, and we'll just double check with, okay, New American Standard, 2 lines. ESV, 2 lines. And New King James, 2 lines. All right. So, all right, 2 lines it is. Now then, what kind of parallelism do we have here, you think?
Let us swallow them alive. Is this a kind of synonymous?
I think
Because
so.
like Sheol, the like Sheol and those like those who go down, it's like to the pit. Like yeah, it's synonymous.
Yeah, I think
And
so.
swallow them alive, and even as a whole, even whole.
Yeah. And here he doesn't say let us swallow, but I think that idea is in the second line, right?
Yeah,
As those,
as those who go down.
yeah. So I think again, it's not as clean or fully obvious as synonymous, but I think that's the best understanding of this, especially because yeah,
Because
the pit and
in
Sheol there.
ASB Pastor Tim, there's a word like also.
Yeah,
Like those who go down to the pit
yeah.
in ESB.
Okay, good. That one's a little bit challenging, but I think that's the best option from what you selected there. So that's good. Okay, verse 13. Let's go back to Godwin. We'll each do one more, and then we'll finish that.
Yeah.
All right.
We'll we'll find all kinds of precious wealth. We will fill our house with spoil. Just like a contrastive assertive. The 2 lines, sorry. 2 lines.
Okay, let's confirm that real quick
Yeah.
with the other translations.
Yes.
New King James has 2 lines. ESV 2 lines. New American Standard.
It's 2 lines.
Good. Okay. So that's all right. And then
2 lines.
so let's look at this.
We'll
We will find
and we'll feel.
we will fill We will find.
And all kinds,
We have
the wealth and the spoil is weird.
precious wealth. Yeah, spoil.
The spoil, yeah. And the
So
all kind, I think
yeah,
there's
the
an,
middle part's not as clear synonymous, but
yeah,
it seems like
it's a synonymous with,
synonymous. Line 2 repeats. And you could say,
it's a,
you,
someone just like,
sorry, go ahead.
uh, I think it's somehow just like contrastive also. I don't know if it's right.
Well, what would be contrasted here?
I don't know. Sorry, my bad. No, it's just
Yeah.
like a developmental and the result or
Yeah, it could, developmental, like expansion, maybe,
yeah. Mm.
but because he's saying we'll
But
find and then we'll fill,
mm, but the
we'll
most likely it's like a synonymous.
find and then we will fill. So that if someone put expansion developmental here, I could see a possibility for that,
Mm,
but seems to be synonymous.
yeah,
But this one's a little tougher.
because it was the it's almost the same, but the word also is very different. And I think the one thing that we can check is the precious wealth and the spoil.
Yeah,
So I
those
think
are
we can
synonyms.
mm,
Yeah, it's just that we will find and we will fill is close, but then
yeah, it's
it's
really
almost
different in the all kinds.
yeah. So this is again leaning synonymous.
Okay.
Now, what's interesting here, notice this. Um, I believe the literal, if we go to the literal, so let's do this little exercise here. Let's go to Bible Hub. Because this is a way that we can find the word order.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go to Proverbs, and then we'll do interlinear, interlin there, the middle. Okay, click for the chapter, so I'll get all the verses, and then it's verse 13. Let's go down to 13. Now notice all kinds of possessions, precious, we shall find, we shall fill our houses with spoil. So here's what the literal, so that means this is actually all possessions precious we will find, we will fill our houses with spoil. Uh, so it looks like there could be a chiasm here. Because we will find is what ends verse line 1, and we will fill is what begins line 2. Even though the English doesn't show that. It just puts, and that's the problem, like I mentioned in class, with chiasms. Sometimes we don't see them because the English translation doesn't follow the word order all the time. And so, and I really don't like that they do that because then you miss possible chiasms like this in poetry. So, so really, they should have translated it, all kinds of precious wealth we will find, because that's the actual order in Hebrew. And then we will fill our houses with spoil. See? Now, if we had followed the word order, if the English had, then you would see it. You see the green there, So if it is a chiasm, that would support, a synonymous parallelism because you usually don't have it in developmental. And then it would be focusing on the we will find and we will fill. Okay? Now,
Yes.
like I said, in English, you wouldn't have seen that because it translated it this way. But what I like to do is then go to the Bible Hub and just look at the actual word order, and then you'll notice it there. All kinds of possessions, precious, we shall find. And then the second line, we shall fill our houses with spoil. All right.
Yes. Yes,
Questions on that?
Thank you.
All right.
None so far.
Good job. Okay. Jay, let me give Stephen this one, and then I'll give Jay the next one, and then Jason will have the last one. Stephen, if you're there, you want to do verse 14?
Yes, Dr. Tim. Throw in your lot with us. We shall all have one purse. 2 lines, but I'm not sure with the other translation.
Yeah, I'll look that up for you real quick just to confirm. Verse 14, New American Standard, 2 lines. ESV, 2 lines. New King James, 2 lines. So we're good there.
I feel like it's illustrative, developmental illustration, but I'm not sure.
Developmental illustration or explanation. Okay, so which line would be illustrating which line or explaining?
So line 2 illustrates line 1, but I'm not sure. We shall all have one purse. I'm not sure. Or it could be expansion.
Yeah, could be expansion. Or it could be result, right? Throw in your lot with us, like, right? Then we shall all have one purse.
Oh, I think yes. That's the right answer. The result.
Yeah. And we could put reason result, but I think line 2 is giving the result of line 1. Kind of like, if you do this, then, right? If you throw in your lot with us, we'll have one purse. We'll all have. So that's probably it's not it's not synonymous or contrasting, right? Because the second line doesn't say, it's saying something different. If he had said, throw in your lot with us, give us your possessions, I don't know. That would be more synonymous. But here he's saying something else. So I think probably result makes the most sense to me. Okay.
Yes. Thanks, Dr. Tim.
Thank you. Jay, give you verse 15.
My son, do not walk in the way with them. Keep your feet from their path. Two lines.
Yeah, and let's just confirm that by looking at the other translations real quick. First, New King James, 2 lines. ESV, 2 lines. New American Standard, 2. Yep. Now, what kind of parallelism do we have here? One thing I like to do is first notice, you see like the way, path, those are similar ideas. Do not walk. Keep your feet.
Synonyms ba, sir? Synonymous.
I think so. Right? With them.
Yeah.
I think he's saying the same idea. Do not walk, keep your feet from. In the way, their path in the way with them. I think it's the same idea. I would say synonymous. Okay. All right. Questions on that, anybody? What we do is try to look for connections, and if it seems like, if we see synonyms in both lines, and if it seems like it's saying the same thing, then it's likely synonymous. The second line is not adding to information to the first one. It's not contrasting. I think it's just saying something very similar to the first, so it's synonymous. All right, thank you, Jay. Jason, you get the last
Yes,
one.
Pastor.
Verse 16.
Verse 16, for their feet run to evil, and they hasten to shed blood. Synonymous, 2 lines.
Okay, so that's our 2 lines, and then, synonymous. All right, let's first check the lines. The New American Standard is 16, on verse 16, 2 lines. ESV, 2 lines. New King James, 2. So it is 2 lines. Synonymous.
They hasten.
Yeah, and I already highlighted for you, so I kind of gave you a little hint. So their feet run, they hasten. To evil, to shed blood. So yeah, that's synonymous. Now, here's something interesting. If we go back to our interlinear, verse 16, notice this.
Conjunction.
Okay, for their feet to evil run, they make haste to shed blood. Now, that's the word order in the Hebrew. But if you look at what was something there? For their feet to evil, they run. Yeah. So you notice they run, should be they run here, and they make haste. So the word order actually looks like it may be revert. It may be a chiasm. Literally, it's this: for their feet to evil, they run. They hasten to shed blood. So for their feet to evil, they run is the actual word order in the original, in the Hebrew. So the English, though, didn't put that. It says their feet run to evil. Again, they switched the words around. But it looks like we actually do have a chiasm here as well. They run and they hasten are what's being focused on here. Okay, so the verse should literally read, if we follow the word order in the Hebrew, for their feet to evil they run, and they hasten to shed blood. All right, so they run, they hasten. Their feet to evil, to shed blood. Okay, so we see that a little more clearly, that they run and they hasten. So the word order's been shifted. So it looks like a possible chiasm here as well. All right. Okay, let me just run through the last couple verses for you, just for a couple more examples, and then we'll be finished. All right. Verse 17, indeed it is useless to spread the baited net in the sight of any bird. Okay, there's 2 lines here, and we would see that if we compared the other translations. I won't do that. Now the question is, what kind of parallelism? Anybody have an idea? Want to? Doesn't look like synonymous, right? We don't have any, here net and bird, those aren't really synonyms. Um, I would say it's developmental,
Yeah.
and I would say it's expansion. The second line is adding more information to the first. Would be my assumption, my opinion on this one. Does anyone have another thought? Again, I think the second line just sort of completes the full idea of the verse. All right. Let's look at verse 18. They lie in wait for their own blood. They ambush their own lives. So here we have their own lives, their own blood. They lie in wait. They ambush. To me, it's two lines, and we would see that in the other translations. And then I would say this is synonymous. Okay. Now, again, if I check the interlinear, notice they, for their own blood, lie in wait. They lurk secretly. So that ambush and lie in wait, those are put together. So actually, it looks like yet another possible chiasm here. The Hebrew literally is this, but they for their blood lie in wait. And then the second line is, and they ambush their own lives. So we have lie in wait is what was synonymous with they ambush. And then we have their blood, their own lives. Okay, so again, I think we see the possibility here. They for their blood lie in wait. And they ambush their own lives. Okay, so this is, I think, the third or fourth possible chiasm in this section. Kind of interesting. Then finally, so are the ways of everyone who gains by violence. It takes away the life of its possessors. So here I would say, so are the way of everyone who gains by violence. So it's two lines here, which would be what we would see in the other translations. And here it's developmental result. Line 2 is a result of line 1. See that? The ways of everyone who gains by violence, it takes away the life of its possessors. That's the result. Those who gain by violence, their life is taken away. I think that's how I would do that. Okay? All right, so the last step then is to take, let's go back to the assignment, so with first step, identify how many lines. And again, for that, compare the translation. Second step, the type of parallelism. And then the third step, there's one more, is to now take those and just put it all together, summarize them, put them together in one spot so you can see. In this case, we notice we have synonymous, 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 synonymous. So we want to just look to see, is there any patterns? Okay, I might even highlight, there's a chiasm on this one, potentially. Chiasm, chiasm. And then the others look like developmental expansion. So half of them are synonymous, half are developmental. Maybe not a pattern here. Often there's not, but sometimes you might see one. Okay, so that's the third step. And then you're done. All right, so this assignment is, I think, usually not as time-consuming as some of the other ones. All right, so that's it. Any questions or comments on this one? Parallelism.
And so far, right now, Pastor Tim.
Okay. So, which is totally fine. If you do, as you're going through your assignment, have any questions, as I always say, feel free to message me. Be happy to help with your text. And our next session next week, Lord willing, will cover the imagery and the poetic devices, which is that next step in the poetic analysis for your proverb, the Sign Proverbs passage. Okay. All right. Well, thanks for joining, guys. It's good to see you. And I'm going to ask if Jason would be willing to close